Morning all, hopefully everything's all working. I've been doing more live streaming lately, so I have to keep changing settings and so on. And OBS can be a little bit temperamental for some reason on this machine. Housekeeping. On this channel I did an interview with a guy who's doing a documentary on Gamergate. So you can see that if you go looking. I think I need a bit more light in here. That's better. Yeah, so you can see that if you go looking for it on this channel. Did that Friday, I think. So you should be able to see that. Next couple of days are the last couple of days that you can get pre-orders in for the Election Party card game. And we're also looking for reviewers and so on. So if you know any channels that do card game, board game reviews, that sort of thing, who might be interested in reviewing a fun party game, then let me know. What else? My first gaming weekend of the month is coming up. We'll be starting our Cyberpunk campaign, so in the lead up to that I'll be working on material for that and my Cyberpunk retro clone, so keep an eye out for that. I'll probably release the cloned rules for free and then do supplements for it as a sort of little side project. So my idea is to do a generic sort of star punk sort of rule set, and then it'll be like cyber start, so you can put the two together like that. That's my idea anyway. I think we need more retro clones, more old school other than just D&D. It feels a little bit cheeky, but I think the overall benefit to the role-playing ecosystem and everything is there. Right, news. Got stuff to be getting on with, so let's go through this. Right, I wasn't going to bother commenting on the Harry and Meghan thing, being a staunch small r Republican, as I am, small r, but it's not so much the story itself as the stuff around it that's interesting. So a lot of the criticism directed at the royals, now that she's part of the royals, has been somewhat racist in tone, but then other people blow that up out of all proportion. The tabloids have always been awful, and of course there's the whole situation that the royals are, in a sense, public servants paid out of the public purse, and so to an extent they have a duty to serve the public and the nation in the same way that any other ostensible members of the government do. right? But there's the personal angle, because Princess Diana was essentially driven mad and then hounded to death by press attention, paparazzi, in the end. So there's a more interesting personal side to all of this, with Prince Harry and so on. It's tricky. You can't blame them for wanting to get out of the limelight to the extent that they're in it, and to get away from Britain and the tabloids over here. And this has only made the tabloids more rabid, and certainly when you understand that he lost his mum to that bullshit, why he would want to get away with it. And he has said as much. The Queen has called them to a sort of conference, and William is much more the dutiful son, the traditionalist. Harry may not even be Charles's, quite honestly. I mean, look at him; he's kept his head of hair. He doesn't have quite the same sort of look. But being called to a meeting by your grandmother is a bit weird, isn't it? The whole royal thing is just a bit weird. So on a philosophical and political level, I can understand people's anger, and I don't think it should all be deflected as being somehow racist. Some of it is, of course, but we should be able to discern between the two. But on the other hand, I can perfectly understand, on a personal level, why he wouldn't want the media to drive his wife insane in the same way that it did his mother. So I don't see a particularly easy solution, but basically what they're suggesting is that they step back a bit, do their own thing more, which is fine if they become truly financially independent sooner rather than later, which is what they're saying they'll do, but we'll see. Should they lose their titles? What do titles mean anyway? I might buy myself a title from Sealand just to prove that it's meaningless, the same way I have my Doctor of Divinity and my Reverend title from the First Church of Atheism. I might add some more meaningless titles just for the hell of it. So when you strip all that bullshit away, what you have is someone in the public eye, whose partner is in the public eye, who lost their mother because of media attention, and plenty of other people who aren't royals have had massive negative media attention. So I think it's understandable on a personal level. On a political and philosophical level, they have a duty. I don't think they should exist. But if they want to modify and modernise the role of the royals, then I think that's good to an extent. Us Brits tend to be into our gradualism when it comes to change. So why not? And fair play to him. He doesn't want his wife driven mad and killed by the media, or his kids, I'm sure. Where's my mouse pointing on? There it is. Right. Moving on then. So what's my resolution to that? Yeah, they should go. I don't see why they should have to give up the titles. They're meaningless, but they should be cut off from the civil list sooner rather than later. And then I no longer give a fuck. Sound good? Good. One good thing to come out of Boris Johnson's government, one good thing, is that Northern Ireland seems to have been united in its dysfunction and resentment and concern about what has been going on, and that seems to have driven the two sides, the nationalists and the Republicans in Northern Ireland, to come back together and to reopen Stormont, which is the devolved assembly in Northern Ireland. Same way you have the Scottish Parliament, the Welsh Parliament, no English Parliament yet, but maybe at some point. So they've come back together. We'll be meeting again and running the sort of local regional government again, which is good, right? That's a hopeful sign for peace in an instance where we're seeing things becoming more precarious due to Johnson and the whole Brexit mess and everything else. If they can come together in Stormont and hold things together and unite Northern Ireland in the interests of Northern Ireland, that's a good thing. They've been promised some extra funding, some new power sharing agreements. They've got a whole bunch of issues to look forward to, and stuff is kind of moving forward when it comes to Northern Ireland. gay marriage was just legalised in Northern Ireland. Britain is not a single country. The United Kingdom is not a single country. It's very regional anyway, even just within England. But then when you take Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland into account, laws differ. This is particularly true of Scotland and particularly true of Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland tends to be a lot more religious, a lot more regressive, and so on. So even though same-sex marriage was legalised everywhere else, it hadn't been in Northern Ireland, but now it is. And Ireland itself has always lagged behind a little bit. I think they only just legalised abortion last year or the year before. So this is good. This basically brings Northern Ireland into alignment with the rest of the United Kingdom and into alignment with Ireland. And I believe abortions were also legalised recently in Northern Ireland. That used to be a bit of an issue there. And the local laws, the local changes, the local amendments, and so on in Northern Ireland haven't been being put through because Stormont has been so utterly dysfunctional and broken up. So that's one good thing that's already come out of that. And they've got a bunch of issues to dig through because it's been suspended since how long? 3 years? Yeah, it's been suspended for 3 years. So almost the normal full term of a parliament, which is 4 to 5 years normally. Here in the UK, where they've been suspended and not doing anything. So a lot of catching up to do. It's a brief list of issues that they're dealing with from BBC site. Property taxes, regional rates thereof. Aftermath of a rates re-evaluation exercise. So currently hotels and pubs are facing really steep rises in rates bills in Northern Ireland, and so to help the economy they'll need to do something about that. Northern Ireland has suffered from not having a great deal of long-term planning, so yeah, a budget with a decent long-term plan, especially with Brexit looming, seems like a good idea. In education, there's a long-running pay dispute with lots of industrial action and striking and so on. So some of this money that they've been promised will probably go into schools. Schooling is a contentious issue in Northern Ireland because of this nationalist-Republican split. Where you mix kids, you create conflict. There were instances where kids were being protested from going to certain schools that are seen as either nationalist or Republican going back years. So we'll see how that goes. In terms of justice, the Northern Ireland court system is much too slow and isn't dealing with issues fast enough. And they're not dealing with serious sexual assault and other sexual offence cases. So there's talk about streamlining that and changing some of the rules around that. Not too sure, but I'm not really that knowledgeable about Northern Ireland's particular ins and outs. Quite often we forget about it. If it wasn't for Why Don't You being on when I was a kid, I'd probably entirely forgotten about Northern Ireland. And frankly, I hope they unite with Ireland. More power to them. In terms of health, Northern Ireland has often lagged behind the rest of the country in terms of that, in terms of staffing and so on. It's a relatively impoverished area of the UK, so it has all the usual problems that impoverished areas of the UK have, plus all the uniquely Northern Irish problems. So we'll see how that goes. Nothing else hugely interesting. I mean, trade issues are a big issue in Northern Ireland because both being members of the EU up until the end of this month, and then the transition period, there's a lot of traffic to and from Northern and Southern Ireland, which has only been really practical as well since peace broke out there. So there's a lot of agricultural issues, import-export, infrastructure issues. It's going to be very expensive to resplit Northern Ireland from Ireland. There are no good solutions, and we've already seen increased terrorism, a rise again in Republican terrorism in Northern Ireland, and unless something very strange happens, and very unlikely, I think we're going to see an increase in that. So it's good that Stormont has come together again, But after 3 years of wrangling and dispute, I think it shows just how serious the Brexit situation is for Ireland and Northern Ireland. So, yeah, things to look forward to, I guess. A great volcano has gone off in the Philippines and is spewing gigantic plumes of ash and smoke into the air. Ironically, between this and the brush fires in Australia, a lot of shit is being dumped into the atmosphere. A lot of it is carbon, which is not good news for any of us, but the particulates and the sulfur and so on from the volcano might actually help ward off global warming a little bit for a while. We will have to wait and see. Maybe setting off volcanoes is a way of geoengineering. Who knows? Currently, the plume of smoke from Taal, I think that's how you pronounce it, Taal. Any Filipinos in the audience can correct me. About half a mile high plume of ash and smoke into the sky, and it's creating its own weather system in the same way that the bushfires are, with a lot of lightning and other hideousness going on there. Let me see if I can find a picture I can just quickly flash up for you. Or a couple of pictures. I mean, it's spectacular. Destruction always is. I think it's the most spectacular eruption since that big Icelandic one, which I won't even try to pronounce. Alright, let's see if I can show you these. So I don't usually bother, I just talk on here, but this is worth looking at, I think. That's what you watch this show for, my lack of preparation. Okay, I don't know if you can see that. That's a huge plume of smoke. And then the other interesting image that's been taken is the lightning storm, which you can see there. Pretty bloody spectacular. Right. Yeah, so good news and bad news. Hopefully everyone living near it's okay. We'll see. Wasn't there also that eruption on that island near New Zealand, I think, recently? People died in that one, so here's hoping no one died in this one. The Catholic Church is considering changing its celibacy rules. Now, this can only be a good thing from my point of view, because repression tends to lead to perversity. I'm all for perversity, but not when it's on unwilling and incapable of consenting targets, such as kids. I think celibacy is part of what has made the Catholic Church and other churches, to be fair, other religions, to be fair, has made them such a shelter for perversity. Plus the fact that it's such a sensitive issue has allowed them to salve their consciences and cover it up and everything, and maybe the fact that you can confess your sins and be forgiven also enables people to do truly horrible things within the Catholic Church and again, to be fair, others. The current Pope is considering putting out a decree that would relax the celibacy rules around Catholic priests. So much like priests in the Anglican Church and elsewhere, if you're already married, I think the idea is that you will then still be able to become a priest. I don't think existing priests will have the situation relaxed for them, but we might see. But the previous pope, who you may remember retired, he says this is a bad idea. Never mind that other Christian churches have done it fine and seem to be all the healthier for it. He's much more of a traditionalist, and it's a bit of a scandal for the ex-pope to still be alive, for one thing, but to speak out about possible plans of the current pope. Could we see a Catholic schism over this? Could we see two popes? Perhaps, who knows? This is quite a big issue for the Catholics, and for the government of the papacy. Who knows? I can see some very arch traditionalists wanting to split off, and this current pope isn't quite as modern and as right on and great as people like to say he is, but still. So what happened was, in October, a bunch of Catholic bishops got together for a meeting, the synod meeting, to discuss the future of the church in the Amazon. And during that, there was a suggestion that in more remote parts of the Amazon, more obscure areas, older married men should be allowed to be ordained. Because there's a shortage of priests in South America, really, so they wanted to expand their recruitment pool, essentially, and to allow for more missionaries to basically take their families and their spouses as a sort of support structure, and they're going to be considering it. So that's very limited circumstances, but once you've got that wedge in there, you should be able to spread it to apply to others. And that's what critics are fearing, that this is a slippery slope. If we allow married priests in the Amazon, it's a pretext to abolishing celibacy as a requirement altogether. Like I say, other churches have done this fine. I think it would reduce the amount of abuse and so on within the Catholic Church. I can't see a drawback to it. I mean, I would want the church to disappear entirely, so maybe moving to abolishing celibacy would allow them to cling on for another couple of centuries, maybe. So maybe from the long-term point of view, it's not a good idea. But for the sake of the here and now and the abuse and the problems that go on, and the well-being of the priests themselves, quite frankly, they probably should abolish it. So maybe this is the thin end of the wedge. But from my point of view, that can only be a good thing. Roger Scruton died. Now, if you don't know who Roger Scruton was, he was a conservative political philosopher and author. He'd been in the news a few times recently because he'd been attacked by various people. He did have some controversial views, obviously, being conservative. I only really knew him initially from the fact that he was the author of some standard studying texts when I was studying politics, particularly the Dictionary of Political Thought, which is very useful for grasping basic political principles and ideas. And I strongly recommend you pick up a copy. There's PDFs available online for download. I'm not sure how legal they are. They are previous editions, but you can find them. If you just look up Palgrave Macmillan Dictionary of Political Thought PDF, you should be able to find it and download it. And I like using that as a reference, not only because it was a standard teaching reference when I was learning politics and getting my qualifications, but because as a conservative philosopher and writer, people were more willing to listen to me when I'm arguing with them, when I quote Scruton. Because he's was known as this conservative political philosopher. So if he agrees with me on the definition of socialism, people on the right are more likely to agree. And whatever his personal bias, I do feel that his Dictionary of Political Thought was a very worthy and useful enterprise. So last year he was dismissed and then reinstated to an unpaid role as a government housing advisor, but he got into hot water because he made some comments about Chinese and Muslim immigrants, and has been quite supportive of the idea that there's some sort of witch hunt against right-wing figures. There is to an extent, but there's also a lot of it that's deserved. So once again, we need to exercise discernment on these things. We can't knee-jerk one way or the other. A lot of people have been mourning his loss, many of them unsavoury, such as Sajid Javid from the UK government. And he's an intellectual, he's part of the opposition to me, but I really do feel that his work, particularly on the Dictionary of Political Thought, was very worthy and worthwhile, and it's a shame to lose an honourable opposition that it was an honest actor. So yeah, it's a shame we've lost Scruton, and I'm curious who will now compile the next edition of the Dictionary of Political Thought. I guess we'll find out. There's cycles in technology and interest in technology. It seems like roughly every decade since the 80s we get this surge of interest in certain technologies like virtual reality, like artificial intelligence. We make a certain breakthrough or certain gear becomes more accessible and there's a rush of interest and fascination, and then it fades away again. I think we're seeing that with virtual reality again now. I mean, it's become truly commercially viable in that you can pick up a headset for your PC or your console relatively cheaply and easily. If you do want to relatively cheaply get into it, get a second-hand set for your PlayStation. Supposedly it'll be forward compatible with the PS5, so hopefully no problems there. But AI is the other big one, and we have made a whole bunch of leaps in AI with network learning algorithms, DeepMind, and so on. Robots have become a lot more practical and adaptable. You can look at Boston Dynamics, but then we seem to have hit another limit of some kind. One that probably won't be fixed until the next generation of battery supplies and the next generation of processors come in, because we're barely keeping to Moore's law anymore. We need a leap forward in those kind of technologies. But interest seems to be disappearing. It's more like specialized intelligence and particular sort of task-oriented intelligence. Practical applications are coming forth. And there seems to be a lot less interest in the more sort of general intelligence and AI, and a lot of philosophers of science and others are kind of sounding alarm bells about the potential problems of, a hard takeoff singularity, which doesn't seem particularly in the offing. Maybe within 50 years we might see something like that. But a lot has been invested, that investment's starting to taper off. There are more breakthroughs ahead, but the whole public interest seems to be waning. Investment money seems to be drying up. We've got AI that can do things that we want it to, and that's sufficient for commercial interests, which means it's likely to slope back into academia, like cybernetics courses in Reading and so on, research out of universities, and refinement of what we already have for commercial interests. So the next decade, we're likely to see a slowdown, practical applications, that's going to be the thing. Things like facial recognition, identification, live modification of video. That's somewhat scary, but we're unlikely. Most experts seem to say that we'll see any kind of huge breakthrough as we have seen in the last little while. I will be back in a second. I hear a delivery, so be right back. A problem for every games master has always been coming up with adventure ideas. For years now, Postmortem Studios has been helping out with the 100 Adventure Seeds line. These provide adventure ideas for all genres, and you can get them at RPG Now or Lulu.com. At the end of World War II, the Axis and the Allies went to war with A-bombs until nobody was left to fight. In this atomic wasteland, a new breed of rockabilly hero arises. From the gleaming domes of Science City Zero to the sleazy roller derbies of Vegas and the sky fortress of the Fourth Reich, there's a new world for the taking. 45 Psychobilly Retropocalypse, available at Lulu.com and RPG Now.
Aren't you a little tired of so-called horror media about shiny, sparkly, angsty, whiny monsters? I know I am, and that's why I created Actual Fucking Monsters, where you will play an actual fucking monster doing horrible and monstrous things and being tracked down and killed for it. Buy now at DriveThruRPG, post-mort.com or lulu.com.
The Atomic Age, with its A-bombs, transistorized radios, jet engines, and a new breed of dangerous supervillain, requires heroes to face the challenge. That's where you come in. The world needs you, Agent. Agent of Swing. "Rrrr," said the grinder as it chewed its way through Alice, from the crown of her head all the way down to her toes. It ate the lot of her, unfussy, snout to tail, and cleared its plate. It gnashed its way through her dress, her pinafore, her shoes, and her unmentionables. It chewed her hair, devoured her scalp, gobbled up her arms, wolfed down her legs, gorged itself on her torso, noshed on her skin, and gulped her down without so much as a burp to show for it.
Do you like t-shirts?
Yeah, boy!
Do you like games?
Certainly.
Are you perhaps a little bit kinky?
Yes, quite.
Then buy one of our B&D t-shirts at Teespring. Teespring.com/stores/postmortem-studios. You want to be cool, don't you?
Does the word duh mean anything to you?
Okay, not a delivery person. Well, it was a delivery person, but not for me. They were lost. It's a lot of very similar addresses around here, and whatever company GPS a lot of them use can't find our house. It must not be Google Maps, because that finds us easy. Who knows? Right, what was the next story? Ah yes, CES. Segway have produced a new prototype wheelchair, and it crashed. Now, remember when Segways were supposed to change transport forever and people would be building cities around Segways? Never happened. Kind of dorky looking, and they've got some very limited uses, but they've found a niche. Wheelchairs would seem to be the most sensible sort of application of their technology, away from the whole standing thing. They've got some electric scooters as well, but this wheelchair called the S-Pod, which is basically, it uses their self-balancing technology and tackles different surfaces and so on better than a lot of wheelchairs. It can go 24 miles per hour, which is potentially somewhat dangerous. But a journalist was testing it when they accelerated too much and crashed into a wall, damaging it enough that it wasn't available for any further demos. So yeah, that doesn't look so good, but it's all part of the development process. And I guess people will have more of an eye on them, looking for the hopes of another disaster. So the publicity might not be utterly terrible. Other companies have had issues. LG had a massive problem in 2018. Yeah, there's some other interesting stuff like laptops with a fold-out giant screen, some other self-balancing devices, and so on. It's all the usual consumer tech stuff. But Segway moving into wheelchairs seemed to make sense to me. So them utterly screwing it up and crashing was quite funny. So yeah, I'm sure there's plenty of videos from CES, from local news and tech sections and so on. We've been waiting for Microsoft's HoloLens for a while, and we haven't really seen much of anything. Google Glass, like so many Google projects, kind of faded away into the background. We were talking about virtual reality earlier, but I think augmented reality is much more where we're going to see changes, kind of jumping over the whole virtual reality thing. And Chinese companies are getting very much into that. Nreal is the one that's grabbed the headlines at the moment, with much higher quality images than people were expecting. They're showing off their prototypes. The glasses look a bit clunky, but they seem to work. They are being sued by a rival for allegedly stealing their technology, but it's all about augmented reality effects. It's got good eye tracking sensors. It can create virtual objects in front of you and mix them with the real world. But they are rather clunky looking. Now, my concern is I have to wear glasses. So if you have to pay an extortionate amount for this kind of augmented reality technology to get custom lenses, or if you can't wear them over glasses, then I'm not hugely hugely enthusiastic. I already have problems going to the cinema seeing 3D movies. I opt not to see 3D movies for many reasons, but sometimes it's the only one you can get. But getting the 3D glasses over your glasses and not scratching up your proper lenses is already an issue. So my concern is always, look, if I'm going to be paying hundreds of dollars for some AR glasses or VR goggles or whatever, you've got to make sure there's room for my glasses, or you've got to give me prescription lenses for free or very cheap. Otherwise, it's just not worth it. But I think augmented reality is where we're going to see more development and more interest rather than virtual reality. And I even hope that's the case. There's so much you can do with AR that you can't do with VR. And I think we've already seen that with things like Pokemon Go or Walking Dead, real world. It's primitive stuff, but it's getting there. That's far more interesting. A randy tortoise has saved its species in the Galapagos. He has a legendary libido. This is Diego. He was among 14 male tortoises selected to take part in a breeding program. And that program has produced more than 2,000 giant tortoises to repopulate the Galapagos since the program was begun in the 1960s. And this 100-year-old tortoise has produced about 800 of those children. Bit of a genetic bottleneck, maybe a slight bit of a problem there, but it just shows that with the effort and enough randiness, you can bring your species back from the brink. So if anyone ever calls you a horn dog, just say you're securing the species. Okay, this is more sort of parochial British problems. So a lot of rather negative stories coming out about the NHS, which concerns me because it's usually a pretext to some kind of reform, right? Well, I say reform, I mean destruction and privatisation. One thing that's really impacting everyone is waiting times at A&E and waiting times to see your sort of local family doctor. These have been going up for a while. GPs are kind of semi-private, semi-public to an extent, and a lot of GP practices aren't necessarily making enough money to survive. It shouldn't be about that, but that's the case. And so they're merging, or offices are closing and so on, and that puts more pressure on the remaining ones and puts your waiting times up. Unless I have an emergency, I'm waiting about a month to see my local doctor. I'm very lucky in that our local doctor exists. Otherwise the next one's like 5 miles away. But I also live in an elderly populated area. There's a lot of demand on the services. So, you appreciate and you understand why this is the way that it is. But it's still bad, and a lot of it's down to not enough government funding. So doctors are looking for various innovative ways in which to change this. So a lot of them are eliminating non-emergency appointments. A lot of them are making phone calls your first port of call. A lot of them are shifting more weight onto nurse practitioners, so you won't necessarily see a doctor. You'll see a nurse who can diagnose a lot of stuff, but not everything, and can then refer you on to the doctor. Another solution that a GP office has come up with is multiple patient appointments. So if you all suffer from the same problem, like, say, depression, I've gone to special meetings for depressives to help teach junior doctors, for example. But if you've all got this same ailment, you all go in together and you receive a certain sort of general set of advice. You can quickly describe your symptoms and you can all get seen. And this is more efficient in terms of time. Privacy, though, I worry about that. I don't necessarily want random people from around the village, for example, who also suffer from depression, and I know others do, hearing me spill my guts and talking about my medication side effects and everything else. Privacy is incredibly important when it comes to medication and treatment and discussion of your symptoms and so on. And I've never been one for group therapy either. So where it will work and for who it will work, I don't see a problem. But I am concerned about privacy and other issues. I appreciate why they're doing it and how it's more efficient, but I do worry about quality of service, people's reticence to speak in front of others, and so on. And I don't see this happening at VD clinics, put it that way. Apparently, there is a disparity, sticking with health, between the amount of men giving blood and the amount of women giving blood. Only about 41% of new blood donors in England were men last year, so there's a lot of asking for men to give blood. I try to give blood quite often, but I'm very pale, and they always say, "Oh, you're anemic, you can't give blood." And then I have to suffer through a battery of blood tests to discover that I'm not anemic, and by then, whatever blood drive was going on is over, and we do the whole song and dance again the next time round. Plus, I'm tattooed, and you have to wait a certain amount of time for that. So why aren't men stepping forward to give blood? I suspect men have less free time during the day to go and do it. I suspect more men than women are tattooed. Yeah, I expect that's where a lot of it's coming from. And I think we should start paying for blood, quite frankly. Similar sort of process to what America goes through. Then you might see more people being willing. But I've done my part. I've tried to give blood many times, and always face this wall of, "Oh, you're anemic," and "When did you get your tattoo?" Which is years ago now, but still. So I don't think it's that men are extra squeamish or anything else like that. I think it's just circumstances, time, tattoos, things like that. I'll get to questions and comments at the end. We're nearly done. So what causes sleep apnea? There's been a bunch of discussions about this. People get their PAP machines. I snore these days when I didn't used to. Not as bad anymore. I got one of those orthopedic pillows and I lost quite a lot of weight. But apparently the thing that really, really makes the difference is the amount of fat in your tongue. Weirdly, must be pretty fat to put fat on your tongue. But fat can be deposited there. There are genetic reasons, epigenetic reasons, and environmental reasons why you might put more fat down on your tongue than other people. But that ends up causing a slight blockage, and that's what causes sleep apnea and so on. So lose weight is basically the main thing. Lose weight, sleep on your side, give up smoking if you smoke, don't drink too much before bed, don't take sleeping pills unless it's recommended. And if it's chronic, you can get a CPAP machine. But it's fat on your tongue, so maybe get liposuction for your tongue. I don't know. I didn't even know tongues could get fat. I mean, you're using them all the time when you're speaking and eating, and you're often moving about just when you're sat doing nothing and thinking. But there you go. It's another indicator that weight loss is the way to go. So yeah, keep it up. There's a mystery virus abroad in China again. It's completely unknown to science up until this point, and it's causing severe lung disease in Wuhan in China. About 50 people have been infected. 7 of those are in critical condition. I don't think anyone's died yet. But it's something new. It's not another form of flu. It's completely new. It's not like SARS. It's not like bird flu. That a lot of people remember these things and are concerned by them. It's called a coronavirus, and it can give you symptoms anywhere from a mild cold all the way through to pneumonia and death, essentially. This one's somewhere in the middle, but it could always mutate and it could become more of a problem. But because it's new, we don't really know exactly what it is or where it's come from. New viruses tend to come to humans from other animals. That's one of the main ways in which we get it. So when you have people settling in new areas, encountering new animals or new animal populations, that's when you run into these problems. Now there are also issues in China in particular, because a lot of their meat markets aren't particularly hygienic. They have lots of different species packed very close together. The transition of diseases from one species to another species and then to man, mutating along the way, is much more common and much more likely there. China has a very high population, which is now much more concentrated in the cities. Basically, China is the ideal breeding ground for new human diseases to hit us from animals and to rapidly mutate and cause problems. Fortunately, for the rest of the world, China has a rather authoritarian government, and so in the case of any huge breakout, they're much more politically and socially able to cope with and deal with it and contain it than a lot of the rest of the world is. Think about the state of North Korea in World War Z, and you get an idea of how totalitarianism can be good when it comes to horrible diseases. The flip side of that is that authoritarian groups tend to deny that there's a problem to the outside world for a very long time, but we don't know. Of course, the other issue with new diseases is global warming, and as the permafrost melts, ancient archaeobacteria and viruses and so on become active again, and that's a new place from which new diseases might arise. So we need to be cautious of that as well, and not be like the Russian scientist who extracted some of these and injected himself with them to see what would happen. Bad idea. We talked about waiting times for GPs, but A&E, which is like our emergency rooms, accident and emergency, there are record-breaking long waits this winter. Winter's always the worst. There's more slip and falls, there's more respiratory infections, there's more stomach infections, there's more issues in general. And I am worried that this kind of reporting is a pretext to attack the NHS by this government and to further privatise and cause problems for it. And given Bojo's majority, I don't see anyone particularly being able to stand against him. At least until there's another election. It's a concern. Take these stories with a pinch of salt. Always be sceptical, and try and find out the background. Right now, he's promising a lot of money for the NHS, but really that's only going to make up for what hasn't been spent and invested in the NHS over the last, decade or so. So essentially, we're just treading water. The extra money is welcome, but it's not really extra money, if you follow me. So just be a bit wary of those ideas. Now, there were a lot of promises about mental health services, which I paid attention to, obviously, for my own fuck-brain reasons. And that's being highlighted as another set of failures. Again, be skeptical. There were even hashtags trending about this. But mental health services for young people are particularly stretched. And we are seeing a quite big increase in the amount of young people, at least with diagnosed mental health issues. But there's such demand on the service that 133,000 young people who were struggling with mental health issues were turned away last year. And that's including quite serious issues like self-harm or having been abused. There is not the capacity in the system to deal with it. And it's better to deal with these things younger. I had an attempted intervention when I was in college, when I would have been under this system, when my parents were splitting. And I just kind of brushed it off and redirected them to help my mum and my brother rather than me, which was probably a mistake looking back, though they needed the help as much as I did. But this is a failing, and people being left to cope themselves. The mental health system as a whole is a problem. But if you can tackle these things early, if you can intervene early, you have better outcomes later in life. It's called Child and Adolescent Mental Health Services, CAMHS. If you look for the hashtag CAMHS, I think there were a bunch of stories given there, sort of straight from the horse's mouth, and that's probably more reliable than these reports and so on, though it is anecdote and not data. But you can see the individual cases where the system has failed people. And if 133,000 people have been turned away, obviously an issue. So this is something that really needs money, and there were a lot of promises during the election from every party. Will they be followed up on? It's another one of these cases where we need to hold people to account, I think. And I still intend to keep the Brexiters to account. So I missed some housekeeping. If you look on my Twitter account, I'm doing a giveaway. You've got 2 days left to enter. It's for about £70 worth of gaming stuff. There's a foldable dice rolling mat. There's some metal dice. There's some cards. There's some tokens. There's a copy of Election Party. And all I want you to do is basically reshare the post about Election Party that talks about this. And if you do, you'll go on a little list, and then I'll find out who won and send them the stuff, all for free. So all you have to do is retweet. I'm going to be doing giveaways maybe once a month from now on, at least until I run out of stuff. So look out for that. And yeah, good luck. Hopefully you win. I'm just trying it as a new way of promoting stuff that isn't just obnoxious advertising, by engaging with the people who like my stuff and getting them to spread the word. So we'll see. So far, response not great. I also did my first Facebook advertising for a long time recently. It's not very cost effective, but we'll see if they offer me some free money to do some more advertising. Right, comments. Lots of good mornings. So good morning, Pope and anti-Pope. Yeah, back into history. We could see that split over the celibacy issue. Song says, morning, wish I could be there for the new Cyberpunk campaign. Well, I might run some of it, some related stuff online. So if you can get access to a webcam and a microphone and get a free evening, maybe we can do something there. Adam says, they won't let me give blood because I had a blood transfusion as a teenager when I had my arm broken. Was that during this risky period for contaminated blood? And they're just playing it careful? Or does it produce antibodies? There's some reason, extra reason besides AIDS and so on that they avoid that in certain areas. But it's probably like the tattoo. You probably have to wait a while to see if any symptoms emerge and get some blood tests. Yeah, 1980s. So it was during that difficult period. Do they let gay people give blood yet? I think they relaxed the rules on that. Ben says, Jamie Oliver probably hasn't had a decent night's sleep in decades, probably. Worrying about school children's food. My solution for your problem giving blood is for you to get a spray tan the day before. Yeah, that might help. Unless that contaminates the blood. Adam says, it's only if they've not had a shag for 12 months. Is it still that bad? That's crazy. Straight people don't have that problem, I expect. Maybe that's why more men aren't giving blood, the stigma around homosexuality. Or being celibate, taking us back to the Catholics. Spray tan doesn't prevent you giving blood, but a whole host of other things do. Wow. Can't donate if you have a cold or a cough. Can't donate if you feel ill. Can't donate if you have antibiotics or an infection. Can't give blood while you're pregnant. Can't give blood necessarily if you're taking medication. Can't give blood if you've just been to the dentist. if you've travelled to certain parts of the world, if you have a heart condition, if you have a tattoo or body piercing recently, cancer, if you've had certain kinds of yeah, there's lots of reasons you can't give blood. Oh, antidepressants, that's a good question. Can I donate blood if I... Usually it won't give a deferral unless you're on a particularly high dose or with certain particular drugs. So you need to check, but most of the time you're fine. Right, well, I should get on with my day. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget this is a different channel to my main channel. So please do subscribe. Check out the interview about the Gamergate documentary I did the other day, if you check the videos. This is my live streaming channel, so when I live stream games or interviews or whatever, that's when I do it here. If you just want to hang out and talk shit when I'm playing a game, that's fine. That's all good. I just kind of do it to hang out with mates, really. Right, I should get on. Have a great day and a great week. If at all possible, in this blighted hellscape in which we all live. And I'm looking forward to gaming this weekend. So, take care, everyone. Have a good one. Bye.